and also the new Chamorro Affairs Director, Melvin Wampat Bora. Good morning, Mel.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Let's just start with decolonization. Obviously, with the ruling that came down from the Supreme Court, where are we with decolonization? I hate to say it, just kind of seems like it's dead in the water.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think it's natural to kind of have that sense that it's stalled indefinitely because of the outcome of the Davis case. But in terms of the commission, we're moving ahead as we normally have. There's nothing for us. Nothing has changed. We still have a mandate to educate. We still exist for that purpose, and that's what we're going to continue to do. We are still working on the possibilities of things that can move us forward. There is consideration of producing amended or new legislation that addresses the concerns of the Ninth Circuit Court ruling. We met with the Attorney General. One of the things that he mentioned, and the attorney that was assigned to the case from the beginning, was that the Ninth Circuit Court really did give us very clear parameters in terms of what they deemed unacceptable about our law. And a lot of it really deals with the consideration that this is a weighted public opinion, that this is something that is consequential, even though our law designates that the plebiscite really is a non-binding plebiscite. It's really a glorified survey in a lot of ways. But for us, we understand that the plebiscite is a lot more significant in that regard, and that it's really an assessment and an understanding of what our people desire in regards to self-determination. Now, I also think it is important to note that there has been other action outside of the commission that is significant. There was a filing by Pratehi Letegzan a while back, if you had not heard. Pratehi Letegzan partnered with the UNPO, the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, and they submitted to one of the UN Special Rapporteurs a filing of a claim of violation of human rights in connection with the buildup. Now, this is significant to us because what it does is that it opens up some doors for us in the international community, particularly at the UN for the human rights avenues. This is something that we haven't really done before.
Right.
We primarily engage the UN solely with their committees on decolonization and self-determination. And so by expanding, the reach and the implications of our issue through this human rights violation, it allows us to engage the UN in diplomatic talks in different ways,
right,
which is significant because we're not members of the UN.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, our historical presence at the UN has really been that of, finding creative ways to engage despite our status or lack of voice in the system. And that's something that I would argue that's something that Guam has done really well. Guam oftentimes, in my short experience at the UN, a lot of the sentiment about Guam is that we tend to fight above our weight class.
Mm-hmm.
We do things that we're not expected to do. We find ourselves in the middle of things that we normally shouldn't be involved in because of our relationship with the United States and our status as an unincorporated territory. But because we're very different from a lot of other non-self-governing territories, and because we consistently assert ourselves and our desire to govern ourselves, really does allow us to take on a very unique existence on the international level. And so in addition to this effort, there was also a filing by Mrs. Hope Alvarez Cristobal to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And that filing is specifically to address the issue with the Davis case. Now, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights is not it's not a traditional court in the sense that, we're going to go in and
right,
argue a case and win. And then, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights doesn't have the legal jurisdiction to tell the United States, oh, we find that this isn't correct and that, you have to do X, Y, and Z. That's not really how it works. But what it does do is that it really puts our colonial power on notice, and it brings attention to some of the shortcomings of our relationship and the ways that they are not addressing their mandate on an international level and their responsibilities as an administering power. And so, this is not a GovGuam proceeding. This is not being filed by the Commission on Decolonization. It's a private citizen in collaboration with the UNPO. But it's important to us because, again, it allows us the opportunity to have conversations with member states, and there are member states in the UN that are a part of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights.
Mel,
Now,
just if we could go back to the special rapporteur you were talking about with Pertay Tegson. Is this the one where they
Yes.
would send a team to Guam to kind of check things out?
Yes, that's one of the things that they're asking.
Right.
So when they asserted this claim, that there exists these violations of the human rights of the people of Guam, that one of their requests is for a visiting mission. Now, this is something we're happy about that ask, because that's something that the government of Guam has consistently asked for since we started engaging the UN. And there hasn't been a visiting mission to Guam since the Constitutional Convention. And so the way this normally works is that because we're a non-self-governing territory, we can ask for a visiting mission, but the United States, as our administering power, has to approve the visiting mission. And so the UN doesn't like to kind of just roll in there without an invitation. And so the problem is that the United States doesn't support a visiting mission to Guam. They don't like the idea of the United Nations kind of getting involved in what they consider a domestic issue. But see, this is the fundamental disagreement between us, is that we don't, and a lot of people even in Guam kind of question this, like, why are we dealing with the United Nations? Why are we engaging the United Nations when we should be exclusively dealing with the federal government? Now, I will argue that we've already been there and done that. During the Commonwealth Draft Act, we almost exclusively engaged the federal government and Congress. And that was probably our most, that was probably the push that went the farthest.
Right. Yeah. So let me just play devil's advocate, Mel. What would you say to those people who say that was then, this is now? Maybe we need to re-engage the federal government. We're coming up on a Democratic administration. We got a Democrat governor.
Absolutely. I think that's a very valid point, and it's not to say that. I think it's important to be clear that just because we are making deliberate efforts to engage the UN, to engage the international community, does not mean that we have just abandoned our federal engagement. Right. All we've really done that's different between the Commonwealth Draft era and now is that we have added the international engagement. We have diversified our approach. And that's the thing that I think is very important, because, when it comes to the United States, I was told this directly, face to face from the Assistant Secretary of the Interior, that the federal government will not support self-determination for Guam unless, one, all registered U.S. citizens on Guam registered to vote are allowed to vote, native inhabitant or not, and that, two, status quo has to be an option on the ballot. And those are two things that completely contradict our local law. Yeah. Our local law that was passed through the democratic process, and that's our argument, is that we have done our due diligence in passing the law appropriately and going through the process to pass the law. And so, these are elected officials, people who are answerable to all citizens, all voters on Guam, whether native inhabitant or not. And so, our position on decolonization remains consistent from the beginning. And so, in doing this, in engaging the UN, what we're doing is that we are expanding the scope, because the UN is focused the UN's priority is decolonization. The United States, on the other hand, does not acknowledge decolonization. They like to say self-determination. Now, this is, it seems like it's semantics, but in reality, self-determination is a vote. That's it. Self-determination is a vote, it's a choice. Decolonization is a process. Self-determination is a part of decolonization. You can't decolonize without self-determination.
Right.
And so that's, we're not just after the vote. And I think that's the key component here, is that the work doesn't finish after a vote is held. And that's the whole purpose of education. Education is not just to inform us so that we can make, an educated decision, make an informed choice. It's also to prepare us for what's to come. There's a lot of work that needs to be done after a vote.
Yeah. So there are those who would say, because of the pandemic and our reliance on the federal monies, that now is not the time to talk about decolonization. But in your mind, do you kind of look at the CNMI and how they've resolved their political status issues and how they've really done so well, leaps and bounds better than we have
Absolutely.
in dealing with the virus? Is that your example?
Right. I think that's a great way to look at it, and I'm glad that you bring up the CNMI in this conversation, because you're right. There is a lot of sentiment locally that we're in the middle of a pandemic, we're highly dependent. We were already highly dependent on the federal government, and now more so than ever. And I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree that we are highly dependent on the federal government, on their funding to float our government and our economy and everything. I'm very aware of that reality. But I also think that it's important to understand that even within that framework, we are not treated equitable. We do not get the same kind of consideration as states. We don't even get the same kind of consideration as tribal governments. So I think it's really important to note that, as much as we are dependent on the federal government, as much as we need the federal government to support us and assist us during this very difficult time, we also have to recognize that it is our status that directly impacts the amount of support that we get from the federal government. So take, for example, the CARES Act, right, which is now kind of an afterthought, but, the CARES Act was a huge package that gave a minimum award to every state. So every state got something like $3 billion or something. I can't remember the exact number. And then some states, no matter what, that was like the low count. And then obviously larger states got more. And so once all of that was divvied out, then they gave a huge chunk to tribal governments, and then whatever was left over was split among the territories, and that was determined based on population. And so when we look at the amount of money that was given to Guam, we think, wow, look at all of these millions of dollars that was given to Guam. This is great. Where would we be without this? But what a lot of people don't realize is that we got, in comparison to the rest of the awards of the CARES package, we didn't get a whole lot in respect to what others got. It was not even. It was not fair in any way. And so, even in the percentage split between the territories, Puerto Rico is much bigger than us. It's based on population. And so obviously Puerto Rico got like 75% of what was remaining up from the CARES Act after the states got their award and the tribal governments got their award. And so, we definitely got more than the U.S. Virgin Islands, more than American Samoa. But, we didn't, that's just the reality is as a territory, we don't have the same kind of protections that states do. We don't get the same kind of consideration that states do. And so I think now more so than ever, political status is very important. I think that political status should be at the center of all of our pandemic discussions. I mean, even in the way that we address dealing with the onset of the pandemic, if you remember in the beginning, when all the cases were just skyrocketing, there are a lot of people on Guam who are like, oh, the governor should just
Lock
shut
it
down the airport.
Shut down the
Lock
airport.
it down, lock down the whole island.
Yeah.
especially in the beginning, right when we had that first wave that was we determined was coming from visitors from the Philippines, passengers from the Philippines. We had determined that that was our vulnerable point, was the airport. And a lot of people were clamoring, shut down the airport. But a lot of people don't realize that it is our political status that directly impacts that. The airport is a federally run facility. As much as the governor may want to, she does not have the authority to shut down a federally run facility. Only the president can do that. And so, even in the president's EO, the president, with his executive order, kind of gave the authority to these local jurisdictions and their public health to determine, what was appropriate for their jurisdictions, what was appropriate for their population. And so in a lot of ways that empowered public health on Guam, but only to a certain extent. It didn't allow it, it allowed us to do quarantine, but it did not allow us to close a border. And so, this is a very problematic relationship. The reality is that states are sovereign within their borders. I don't know if you remember in Hawaii, they wanted to do rapid testing, and they were proposing to do it on the H3, which is this huge freeway. They wanted to shut down this freeway and use it as like a venue for rapid testing, so cars could line up, they could do the test, the swab, and move them out. And the federal government was like, no go. This is not going to happen. And Hawaii, the governor of Hawaii just straight up was just like, we're going to do it. It doesn't matter. We're just going to do it anyway. And as a state, they have the ability to assert themselves in that way. But we don't have the same kind of relationship with the United States as that Hawaii does. And so, this is a very challenging time for us. It's a very difficult thing for our government to try to navigate and make difficult decisions for our people when we don't really have the power or sovereignty authority to do so. And so we're often stuck in a situation where we're trying to, fight this 8-headed monster with one hand tied behind our back, and it's just not, it's our hands are being tied by our relationship, not through any, lack of ability or lack of desire. And I think that's a thing that we got to really consider, is when we look at a population like CNMI or, our neighbors, in the Micronesian islands, and Micronesia is virtually COVID free right now.
Thank
Guam
you.
is like the one place that is just, we can kind of impact it. I mean, obviously we've been doing much better.
We're kind of sticking out here,
Yeah, and it's not just about our population. I mean, obviously we're more densely populated than most places in Micronesia, but we have a very different relationship with the international community, a very different relationship with the federal government, and so it requires us to kind of take a different approach.
Yeah. Hey, if you guys are into this,
that's the value.
Mel, sorry, if you guys are into this, go to our KUM podcast network. We did a whole bunch of podcasts on decolonization. Mel and I did. This is our TED Talk on decol this morning. We're kind of running on time, Mel, so I want to switch gears a little bit. You're doing double duty, Chamorro Affairs Director. When did that happen, and what's in store for you at the department?
I came on board in October when the previous president resigned, serving in acting capacity. The president of DCA oversees the Department of Chamorro Affairs, the museum, the Chamorro Village, sits as a member of the Commission Chamorro, and also has collateral duties as director of the library, the public library system. So it's definitely a massive assignment. It's something that I'm not, I think somebody quoted me in the post as saying that I'm not going to sugarcoat it, that it is a lot of work, and I definitely am anxious about it, which is absolutely true. I stick by that statement. It's no secret that this is a daunting task. But that said, I understand the value of this work, and I understand that, the work and the mission of the Department of Chamorro Affairs is absolutely critical to the work of the Commission on Decolonization. Unfortunately, these types of issues are not always priorities in our government. And so, we're like a lot of agencies that are understaffed and underfunded and overworked, and have this huge mandate to fulfill. And so for for, kind of going back to my previous hat with the Commission on Decolonization, we're a small operation. There's 3 of us in the office, and our mandate is to educate the entire island on political status and manage these 3 task forces, which is not an easy thing to do. And so, we recognize that decolonization is incomplete without efforts toward nation building. It's not enough to say that, we want to attain a higher level of self-government, but we also have to have in place a very strong national identity. It's something that is very challenging for us because, we've endured a very long period of colonial rule, which has clearly impacted our identity. And so, the Commission and Department of Chamorro Affairs, really, that's their charge. That is their mandate, is to defend the interests of the indigenous people and to effectuate this effort toward nation building. And so it's a nice thing to have us connected in this way. I really am looking forward to impacting the work on that level with the Commission. There's a lot of really great things that our department has been engaging in. There's a lot of work that I think is very important to our movement forward. But what we've seen is that there is this resurgence and this attraction to our cultural identity. And we see this a lot with our young people. Our young people, they want to wear the Sanahi and the Guam shirt, put the sticker on their low rider.
Thanks to the work of the old people. I mean, if you got to go back, if you know your recent history, you'll know that a lot of people fomented the conditions that we're currently enjoying, and so got to give props to those people like Angel, like Ed, like Auntie Hope. I mean, and it doesn't happen overnight. I'm just so happy that it has happened. Library, are you running the library now, man?
Yes, I am running.
So what was that like? Because there was some issues with the old director. I mean, I had like a stack of letters like that. So going in, was that one of your priorities to kind of just like break bread with the staff? And
absolutely. I want to give credit to our public library team. This is a fantastic group of individuals. They're very hardworking individuals. The library has been closed this whole time, or closed to the public, but not closed for work business. The challenge with the library is that it's very difficult to telework for our library staff when the work needs to be done in-house in our facility. And so, in following the Gov's directive, we really had to just bear down and figure out where are the opportunities to telework, and then where there are not opportunities to telework, how do we execute the work safely within our facility? I feel very proud of our team in their ability to adjust and to accomplish this task. And what we've been doing at the library is really trying to prepare ourselves for a reopening and an adjusted reopening in support of these new conditions dictated by the pandemic, and especially its impact on our public school students. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about with the library is the launch of our internet workstation. So as you know, the distance learning is in full force right now. And even though there's a proposal for returning to face-to-face instruction, there's quite a number of students that are not going to return, whose parents are not comfortable with sending them back to school, and they will continue to do distance learning. Now, DOE, I got to give them credit. They really dug in hard and ensured that technological equipment was made available to students. But what we found is that, students have a laptop and they're still not getting in class because they don't have internet. Some students don't even have a electrical outlet to charge their laptop in their home. Some students don't even have running water in their homes. And so, we recognize that these are challenges that DOE cannot take on alone. And so one of the things that we're attempting to do is we received a grant to upgrade our internet capacity, connectivity capacity. And what we're trying to do is to increase the bandwidth of our network at all of our branch locations so that locations can essentially become internet hotspots. So even the houses that just live close to one of our library branches should be able to pick up the Wi-Fi signal. Students who don't live close enough can even just come and park in the parking lot and download their work, or attend class. But what we're trying to do is to utilize this grant fund not just to upgrade our network capability, but also to provide a physical location for students to access the technology. And so what we will be doing is that we will be procuring internet workstations, computer workstations for each library branch to include Nevis in Hagåtña. And then for the villages that don't have a branch in their location, we plan to roll out the bookmobile, which we're working on fitting it to be a mobile hotspot. And so the schedule for the bookmobile will really prioritize the villages that don't have a library branch. And we're going to run it. We're already working with the mayors to figure out how we can identify a set location in the village to work with their staff to, erect a canopy if there's no shade available, so that we can put the workstations outdoors, spaced out, just so that we're ensuring safety and social distancing. It's a lot easier to mitigate the transmission of COVID in an outdoor space. And so, we'll be doing the whole 9 yards, the mask, the hand sand, the temperature screenings and all of that, sanitizing all the workstations before they go back onto the bookmobile. So we just really had to adjust our approach and the way that we can provide service to the community given the restrictions. And so I'm really excited about the work that we've been doing at the library.
That sounds really good, Mel. I appreciate that because we've heard about that effort from GDOE Superintendent John Fernandez, but he didn't have the details at that time, so I'm really glad that you're able to provide that. We got to run.
Yes, we actually so we're still moving on procuring some of these items with this grant, but we are prepared to open the Hagåtña location a little sooner. And so that's our plan, is that we're targeting trying to get the Hagåtña location open not long after DOE launches face-to-face, because that'll be a good time for us to determine which kids are not receiving service and which kids can avail themselves of service in Hagåtña. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we launch Hagåtña even ahead of the entire internet workstation effort, so that at least we can start to mitigate some of the gap as we get everything else prepared for the other branches.
Thank you for that, Mel. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, take it easy. Happy New Year. I haven't seen you since last year.
Happy New Year. Thank you guys for having me. I know I used to see you guys all the time.
I know.
Now I just isolate myself in my office and try not to see anybody. The pandemic has made me extra antisocial.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I kind of like it. Okay, Mel. Have a good weekend.
Thank you guys. Happy New Year. Take care.
Okay. There you go. Melvin Wampat Borja, Commission on Decolonization Executive Director and the Chamorro Affairs Director. So he's overseeing quite a bit.
Yep. That's
really,
the museum.
Yeah.
That's Chamorro Village. Museum, Chamorro Village.
Library.
Yep. It's a lot.
So it's really good to see that